My good friend John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com. He joins us every day at this time. We talk NFL. Although, I think John's about to get a break coming up, right? We took a little break last year for about 3 weeks there to get you recharged for the football season. Is that what I remember?
Yeah, you gotta put me in the corner and plug me in for 3 weeks.
You know what I saw today? You know how, like, there's spots for electric cars, and, like, whoever sees a car plugged in. Have you ever seen a car plugged in one of those spots?
No, never have.
Never.
The only way, right by the station there in Northfield, there's like a Tesla thing right up the street, and I've seen a couple cars parked there on occasion, but that's the only time I've ever seen it.
I had a car parked next to mine today, and he had it plugged in. I was like, holy mackerel.
Now, you're talking to somebody who used to live in Minnesota for about 10 years, so
right.
The old school plug-in cars, and I've seen that a lot. You had to plug in your car.
No, this was
I didn't even know. And by the way, before I moved there, I didn't even know you could plug in a traditional car.
Yeah, this was crazy. My car, like I live in a building, right? So I have, like, in the parking lot, it's like a surface lot, and there's a guy who must have a car that he got them to, and right next to mine, I was like, I've never even seen that guy's car, and he has a spot with the plug, and I've never seen it. I woke up today, walked out to my car, I was like, I'll be damned, this guy's car's plugged in finally. I've lived here for 4 years. I've never seen it one time.
Well, that's pretty good. If he's only going to plug it in once every 4 years, that's not bad. Maybe I'll look into that.
I like it. The spot just for that guy. He gets to plug his car, and everybody else park around him. But no, over at the outlets in Atlantic City, the first 6 spots are to plug your car in. I've never once seen a car plugged in there. Never one time. And 6 spots, I think, are dedicated to plug your car in over there at the Walks in Atlantic City, at the Arts Garage it is. And never have I once seen a car plugged in there.
Yeah, maybe they think they're San Francisco. It hasn't quite gotten us yet.
Well, I know plugged-in cars are expensive, but Jason Peters can afford one now. He got a huge contract. It's not a huge deal in terms of the annual money, but it's the guaranteed money. He said yesterday he wanted he wanted to be here, and today he gets the deal. No coinkydink, eh?
Yeah, and you have to start thinking about Howie Roseman and how this happened, because I think it was Fletcher last year who stayed away from OTAs, and he got his big deal. And then Jason stays away from OTAs, comes back, says he'd like some clarity, and bang, he gets an extension of his contract. So, but, he's still playing at a high level. Obviously, he's 35 years old. Generally, as most contracts, this is really a 2-year deal. Guarantees him $15.5 million. Essentially, it actually lowers the cap price for the Eagles over the next 2 years of what they would have had to pay Peters. So this was a little give and take. They guaranteed a significant amount of money because Jason was out of guarantees, but from a salary cap standpoint, it's a little bit less on the books for the Eagles. So I think it was a good give and take from both sides.
I guess conventional wisdom would ask this question then. He's 35. You just tacked on at least 2 more years. Can he play? Can he play 2 more years at a high level? I mean, he's 35. Is that worrisome? I tend to think offensive linemen can go into their later 30s, and when you're as good as a guy like Peters, I'm not quite as worried. But there could be other dominoes to fall here.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at his history, and he's had some significant injury problems in the past, been relatively clean health-wise for a couple of years. But I always say when you go to an Eagles practice, I mean, one of the most interesting things is watching Jason Peters stretch before they get started, because, at his age and the punishment he's taken, it takes a while just to get ready to practice. So this is a guy who's got a lot of sort of miles on the tires, but he's playing at a high level. He's a Pro Bowler last season. Now, sometimes that doesn't mean all that much, especially for guys with big reputations like Jason has, but he played well last year. He really did. And you take out the the false starts, which occasionally he had trouble with, he played really, really well. And, I was talking to Bob Groats at practice, one of the Eagles beat writers, and we were trying to figure out the tackles that are better than him, and there's only maybe 5 or 6. So worst case scenario, he's the 6th best tackle, left tackle in pro football, and that's pretty darn good.
Yeah, Pro Football Focus had him at number 7 last year for left tackles. I'm okay with the deal. It doesn't bother me. I think he can still play. But the question becomes, Lane Johnson got left tackle money. What's the future at the left tackle position? Is it Jason Peters, or is there another spot on the line for him?
Well, yeah, interestingly, that came up with Doug Peterson. I was a little surprised because he actually paid a little bit of lip service that maybe down the road next season, it's not going to happen this year, but potentially Jason could end up inside as a guard. And that did take me a little bit by surprise because he's obviously been a left tackle throughout his entire career. He's been tremendously successful. You're right about the money, though. Generally, Lane Johnson's playing right tackle, getting left tackle money, and you have Jason Peters getting left tackle money. So you can look at it 2 different ways. Can you afford to pay both of those guys? The Eagles have essentially said yes because they're very good players. And whether Jason goes to 2018, 2019, hey, Lane Johnson can move over at that point.
Yeah, and obviously Lane Johnson, we signed that deal, last year? Did he get that big deal?
Yeah, and unfortunately for him, obviously with the suspension, some of the guarantees got sort of knocked away. But, he plays at such a high level, and you're talking on the other side, you're talking one of the 2 or 3 best right tackles in football. There's no doubt he's going to get his money for the foreseeable future just because he's such a good player.
John McMullen at Eagles minicamp today. This is the mandatory minicamp. And how about Marcus Smith? Yesterday you wrote about this later on in the evening. He kind of was laissez-faire about why he wasn't at the OTAs.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It really doesn't from either side.
Challenging them to cut me. Please cut me.
Basically, that's what it is, and the Eagles, for whatever reason, haven't cut him. And that, from their standpoint, it's a little strange because you don't want a guy who's not happy in the locker room and all that kind of stuff. But, if you look at where he is, he basically had him going through individual drills as the last defensive end. So that kind of tells you where he is on this roster. So while we always talk about it's very unlikely that he's, going to beat out the Vinnie Currys of the world or the Chris Longs. Right now, he's behind Alex McAllister and Stephen Means. I mean, that's how far he's fallen as far as the Eagles go. So there's no question. And remember, he's got a significant bonus due, I think, on the 3rd day of training camp. So this is not one of those things that are going to go all summer. The Eagles are going to get to that 3rd day and say, no, we're not going to give you this money and cut them. So from their standpoint, I don't know why they're hanging on. Obviously, maybe you would want to get something in trade, but there's just no value there. So it's one of those situations you're just kind of playing out the clock. And
yeah.
Eventually, Marcus is not going to be here.
A lot of Donnell Pumphrey lining up all over the place. I've been reading a little bit that him and Sproles on the field together. I mean, it seems that they're trying to create at least some matchup problems.
Yeah, they are. They've been doing a lot of that this spring, having the 2 of them on the field together. But I always, caution you. And Jim Schwartz actually was the guy who explained it. And he gave an example of Jim Palmer, the old Baltimore Orioles Hall of Fame pitcher, and he would always talk about how bad he was in spring training, and his ERA would be 10, and everybody would panic. And Palmer would say, he's throwing one pitch, he's working on a curveball, or he's working on a changeup, and he's just trying to get that pitch down to add to his repertoire. And he would show up when the season started, and he'd be an all-star pitcher. That's just the way off-season works. And the off-season in the NFL is a similar thing. It's for trying things out. And one of the things the Eagles want to try out is to see if they can get Sproles and Pumphrey because they're both so explosive on the field together. So they've done it a ton, but I'm not sure if it can work in a real live NFL environment for obvious reasons. I mean, you're talking about two tremendously undersized guys. So you're taking a blocker off the field. You're also indicating to the opposing defense, hey, something's up, because Sproles and Pumphrey are on the field at the same time. So while it sounds good on paper, I'm not sure if it's going to be realistic come September, but we'll see.
Yeah, one thing, with this offense, you look at the options, and, Alshon would most probably be number one, right? He's the top option. But Zach Ertz, I mean, the tight end there, you would probably think he's got to be up there. And then you got Jordan Matthews, Torrey Smith, Darren Sproles. It seems like it's going to be a tough way to balance getting these guys all the football because you got a lot of guys who do a lot of different things. I think that's really the big thing here. You got a bunch of guys who have different skill sets as opposed to many of the same guys. Last year you had nobody that can do certain things, a bunch of guys who just stunk. But you got a lot of guys who can do a lot of different things, which makes it intriguing, but also makes it tough to keep everybody involved.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's only one football, and obviously you mentioned the two guys that in theory in the passing game are going to get the most traffic, and that's Zach Ertz and Alshon Jeffrey, and then it'll all kind of trickle down from there. And I keep, it was another day. Carson Wentz, by the way, by far his best day at practice of the spring. He was really, really sharp today. And he spoke after practice, and who was the star again? Nelson Aguilar. Throw his name in there. He caught two bombs from Carson Wentz today. Beat Rasul Douglas on one, beat Jalen Mills on the other. He's playing with the first team because Jordan Matthews is still not out there. And Carson Wentz specifically went out of his way to mention him, how many plays he's been making. He's quicker. He's more confident. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of names to throw into the mix as far as trying to get them the football. And the bottom line is you can't get everybody the ball on every play. So I think you're right. It starts with Jeffrey and Ertz, and then it trickles down.
Yeah, and you tweeted today, Carson Wentz very sharp in the team drills. I said this earlier in the 2 o'clock hour, John, that the Eagles made the moves. Whether you like the moves or not, they made an effort to upgrade. They got the offensive line. They upgraded at running back, wide receiver. When you're drafted number 2, there's a lot in your lap, and I don't have a problem with saying that should be more pressure on Wentz this year. Is that accurate, that there's more pressure on Wentz, and there should be?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no question about it. He's not a rookie. He's a starting quarterback in the NFL in a major market. I mean, that alone, when you're not the number 2 overall pick, there's a tremendous amount of pressure that comes with it. And from his standpoint, he's also been earmarked as the face of the franchise on top of it.
He just seemed that he seemed like he got off to that good start. And I talked about this with Josh earlier. Vaitai had the horrible game against the Redskins, and then he got better. But we remember him as the guy who had the lousy game against the Redskins. Wentz came out of the gates with 4 very good games, but then didn't play so well the rest of the way. But we remember him as the guy who played the 4 really good games. I think he has a likability factor that almost gives him a pass a little bit.
Well, I think he is likable, certainly to the fan base, and I think, part of it is just the natural effect that they want him to do well. They see that he's the number 2 overall pick. He's supposed to do well. He's supposed to turn into a franchise quarterback as far as, a mid-round draft choice like Vaitai, who maybe turns into a decent starter, maybe doesn't, but it's not going to cripple you. If you strike out with the 2nd overall pick at the quarterback position, well, you're crippled. I mean, this team is stuck with Carson Wentz for the foreseeable future. So it better be good, because if it's not good, it's going to get really, really ugly. But I think you'll see this year, I think Eagle fans in general will expect more, should expect more, and we'll see how Carson Wentz handles it. He's never struck me as a guy who's going to be overcome by the stage or the enormity of it. It just, that kind of stuff doesn't seem to bother him, so I'd be surprised if it did. But it all comes down to how he plays. And for most of the spring, as I said on this show, people don't want to hear it. He did not look good. Today, he's complete opposite. He was tremendous today. It was a 180. So I think people, really are in two different camps. They expect too much out of a second-year player who's still learning, or they want to say this guy's got bad mechanics and they want to jump the ship. The reality is he's a work in progress, and I think you're going to see improvement, but it's going to be incremental improvement. It's there's still a ways to go.
Yeah, I just in a league that we want to rush everything, right? And young quarterbacks and young players have had instantaneous success, right? A lot of guys, Andrew Luck came into the league, had success. Roethlisberger came into the league. A lot of guys had success early, and there's a ton of guys we're not even mentioning. Skill position players are what we're really focusing in on. And, I think that it is fair for if the fans are going to, demand and expect a lot out of him.
Yeah, you're right, but I mean, everybody has hiccups, even in Andrew Luck. You take a look at a guy who hits the ground running. He won 11 games, 3 straight years, got the Colts to the AFC Championship game, and then, the wheels have kind of fallen off since then.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been nearly as good the last 2 years, and injuries have cropped up and other things. Just about everybody in the history of this league that's played that position has hiccups, maybe with the exception of Tom Brady. But other than that, it doesn't matter who you look at, and maybe Peyton Manning's in that category too because he had such amazing consistency over his career. But you can pick and sort of the scab on any quarterback and point to games and things like that where they didn't look well. I think for Wentz, it's, he was so good so early. And then on top of it, it wasn't expected because he wasn't supposed to start. He didn't have much practice time. When he did get in there, he got hurt in training camp. And all of a sudden he comes out at week 1 looking like Brett Favre. And then the natural sort of market correction happens. And people get a little disappointed. I mean, the ceiling is still there, and I think ultimately he's going to be a franchise quarterback, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow.
Talk with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. He covers the Eagles for us. He also covers the league nationally at FanRag Sports NFL. And some, NFL stuff happening all the time as, I guess the next, after Thursday, for the Eagles at least, will be done. And there might be some mini camps and stuff after that. But one thing I saw, I guess, the other day was, why is his name? Bell, no-show at Pittsburgh, mandatories. So I guess, is he going to be a possible holdout out in Pittsburgh?
Well, you never say never. I mean, when anyone is willing to incur fines, and you can be fined for not showing up at minicamp, and it starts at, I think, $14,000 and goes up from there on 3 days. So, people don't like to lose money, and that's why you see here the example would be Jason Peters and Marcus Smith. That's why they show up, because nobody wants to be docked that pay. But holdouts are rare in today's NFL. So I don't expect it, but you never say never. Even Joey Bosa, I mean, holdouts for rookies are generally non-existent, but Joey Bosa figured out a way to hold out last year in San Diego. And sometimes these guys just want to spend more time doing what they do in the off season, and that could be it. But I ultimately, certainly, week 1 of the NFL season, Le'Veon Bell is going to be in Pittsburgh.
How about Andrew Luck? Any concern? What do you hear around the league about Luck? He said today he didn't know if he'd be. He said he hasn't been thinking about training camp, but this is 2 years in the making now that this guy, the same injury with the shoulder.
Yeah, and he's coming off. He had shoulder surgery in January, and he hasn't thrown a football since.
Nothing.
And he's not
Zero.
supposed to throw. Zero. And, then you have the owner coming out last week saying he still expects multiple Super Bowls from the guy. So talk about expectations. Lux are even amped up over somebody like Carson Wentz. But, until we see him back, until we see him throwing the football, you kind of have no idea how it's going to look. And obviously he's going to miss the entire off-season program. He has. And hopefully he can gear things up. Now, it's not as important for him as a really young quarterback missing off-season work. So I think the health aspect is more important for him. And that's first and foremost. You have to see how healthy he is.
I know you wrote about the Redskins' backfield a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of days ago, maybe last week it was. Matt Jones has asked to be released. I'm a little surprised. I don't think they gave Jones enough of a shot. He averaged almost 5 yards a carry last year. I don't know. Maybe I don't see them enough, but in the times that I watch them, he looks like an explosive player. He's a big physical guy, but it seems that he's the odd man out down there.
Yeah, and, the issue with him has been fumbling. And obviously, if you fumble a lot, you just can't play in this league. And that's just the way it goes. And no matter how talented you are or how good you are. But it's interesting. Some people have cured that over the years. Tiki Barber would be the most notable example, who fumbled a ton early in his career, and the switch went off, and he figured out ball security. But I think that's the major issue with the Redskins, and the fact they don't have much talent at the position. And, Rob Kelly and Chris Thompson and Perrine, the fourth-round pick from Oklahoma, that's it. And that's going to be an issue for the Redskins. People talk about, because they lost Deshaun Jackson, they lost Pierre Garçon, but those were aging receivers. I don't think that's going to hurt them as much as you think. They're able to bring in Terrell Pryor, but that lack of a consistent running game, I think is going to hurt the Redskins.
All right, this is John McMullen. Of course, every day at this time we talk NFL, the NFL news and notes. We'll do it again tomorrow as the Eagles. 2 more days. Actually, tomorrow's the last day, right?
Yeah, tomorrow's the last day, and then it is off, hopefully not to cheerleaders. I hate to take a shot, but hopefully they can last a couple hours before seeing
that's
the
right. Last
first
year,
off-field incident.
That was a year ago when they broke minicamp that a couple of questionable decisions were made by some Eagle players. We'll leave it at that. All right, man. One more day on the beat until a little hibernation for Johnny Mac. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thank you, Mike.